All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're exploring one of the absolute most profound metaphysical debates in all of Eastern philosophy, tucked right inside Volume 2 of the Surangama Sutra. We're going to break down the core debate between what is true versus what is false, and look really closely at what is subject to birth and death versus what is ultimately totally indestructible. It's fascinating because the Buddha systematically dismantles our deepest anxieties about aging, decay, and death, all to reveal a pure, eternal, unchanging truth that exists within every single one of us. We've got a fantastic five-part journey ahead. We'll start with the anxiety of losing the original mind, move into the indestructible nature of awareness, explore some brilliant metaphors about guests and reversed views, dig into the concept of delusions, and finally, summarize exactly how the Buddha guides his assembly to realize their pure original mind. Kicking things off with Section 1, the anxiety of losing our original mind. And honestly, this starts with something incredibly relatable. Imagine King Prasenajit here, perfectly articulating this universal dread that pretty much all of us have about getting older. He's looking back at his life, from being a plump 3-year-old to a really strong 20-year-old, and now, at 62, he's feeling the decline. His face is wrinkled, his hair is white, his body is weakening. And he comes to this very logical yet terrifying conclusion because his physical form is changing and decaying every single second. He's basically destined for total extinction. He figures, hey, when my body dies, my mind dies right along with it. He's terrified, right? But the Buddha doesn't just pat him on the back and offer empty comfort. Instead, he completely shatters that cycle of panic with this absolute paradigm shifter of a question. Your physical body ages, sure, but does your actual ability to see age? That question leads us right into Section 2, the Genjis and indestructibility. This is where we uncover our unchanging nature. Notice how neatly the Buddha splits human experience into two totally distinct categories. You've got the physical form on one side. The Buddha says, hey, remember when you first saw the Ganges River at age 3? And then he asks, now that you're 62, has your visual perception of that river aged? And the king has this light bulb moment. He admits that, yeah, his face is wrinkled, but his actual awareness, that underlying seeing nature itself, is identical. It literally hasn't aged a single day. Which brings us to this incredibly tight logic from the Buddha. He points out that wrinkling represents change. And sure, what changes is ultimately subject to destruction. But your seeing nature, your fundamental awareness, it doesn't wrinkle. And the core takeaway here is huge. If your fundamental nature of awareness doesn't change, it fundamentally cannot die. It is completely free from the cycle of arising and ceasing. The Buddha essentially just handed the king a purely logical liberation from the fear of physical death. But obviously, that brings up a massive question. If we all have this eternal true nature, why are we all suffering so much? That's what we are unpacking in Section 3, the reversal and the guess metaphor. So the Buddha raises his arm in the air, fingers pointing up, and asks everyone what they see. It's upright, they say. Then he casually flips his hand over so his fingers point down and asks again. Now they say it's inverted. And the Buddha's point is brilliant. It is the exact same arm. Concepts like upright and inverted are just arbitrary, made-up worldly labels. Our true nature isn't actually lost or broken. We're just applying false labels. We're essentially looking at reality completely upside down. To really drive this true versus false debate home, he introduces the innkeeper metaphor. Think of a roadside inn. A guest stops in temporarily, gets some rest, packs up their bags, and hits the road. They are completely impermanent. But the host, the innkeeper, he remains stationary. He lives there. He has nowhere else to go. The Buddha is telling us that our passing thoughts, our shifting emotions, all our sensory experiences, those are just temporary guests. But our pure original mind, that quiet awareness watching it all happen, is the unmoving host. We suffer simply because we constantly mistake the passing guests for the permanent host. So how do we actually tell the difference between the guests and the host? Let's dive into Section 4, the 8 returns and delusions. The Buddha uses this awesome mental exercise. He argues that basically every physical phenomenon you see can be returned to its environmental cause, right? Light returns to the sun, darkness returns to the moonless night sky, clear space is returned to open doors, and obstruction returns to solid walls. Everything out there in the material world essentially belongs to something else. And here is the ultimate aha moment of the entire debate. If you return all the light to the sun and the darkness to the night and the space to the windows, what happens to your awareness? the consciousness that actually sees the light and the dark. Where does that return to? The answer is nowhere, because your conscious awareness cannot be returned to any external physical object. It simply cannot be stripped away from you. That unreturnable, unshakable awareness absolutely must be your true self. So, why does our day-to-day world feel so stressful and chaotic if our true nature is just this pure awareness? Well, the Buddha calls it an optical illusion, a literal sickness in our perception. He defines it in two ways. First, individual delusion, which is like a guy with cataracts looking at a lamp and seeing a colorful halo that isn't really there. It's a personal flaw. But then there's collective delusion, where shared karma causes a whole group to hallucinate together, like an entire nation seeing two suns in the sky. The mind-blowing takeaway is that our whole experience of this changing material world is essentially a shared hallucination. It's false. It is not the fundamental reality. Which leads us to the grand finale, Section 5, Realizing the Pure Eternal Mind. How does the Buddha actually guide everyone to wake up to this truth? He lays out a super logical roadmap right here. Step 1, recognize that your sensory experiences are illusions. He literally compares them to seeing non-existent flowers in the sky when you stare too hard at empty space. Step 2, stop grasping at them. Stop letting those temporary guests boss around the host. And step 3, by just letting go of what is false, you naturally awaken to what is true, the Tatthagarbha, which is just the Buddhist term for that pure, unmoving, original matrix of your true mind. And just to make absolutely sure nobody clings to any part of their false identity, he systematically tears down the 5 skandhas, basically everything we think of as us. He proves they're all illusions. Physical form? Just spots appearing when you stare at the sky. Feeling? It's just temporary friction, like rubbing empty hands together for heat. Thinking is an automatic reflex, like your mouth watering when someone says plum. Our impulses or formations are just a rushing river you can't ever grab onto. And worldly consciousness itself is totally empty. He compares it to carrying a jar of empty space from one city to another, actually thinking you're transporting something real. It's all a magic trick. When you finally strip away all those temporary guests, when you clear the cataracts and dismiss all those mental illusions, this is exactly what you are left with. The true, eternally abiding, wonderfully bright, unmoving true nature. The pure, eternal mind that never undergoes birth or death. So I really want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. The text has shown us that the physical world, and yes, even our own aging bodies, are just passing, destructible phenomena. So as you go about your week, try a little experiment. Notice the temporary guests of your experience, your changing moods, the sights, the stress. And as you notice them, just pause and ask yourself, who is the host quietly watching them pass by? Find that unmoving awareness, and you might just uncover your own indestructible true nature. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.